This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 44 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, here to ask questions that you may have while listening to our podcast, but can't ask because this is a recording. Folks, no one wants to think about a loved one dying. Well, let's be honest, with some loved ones you do. But being prepared for what's to come, also known as death, will help ease the burden when the Grim Reaper comes a-knocking.
So, please relax and get yourself something splendid to snack and sip on, put your feet up, and thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me as we talk about millennial grieving. In the first half, Charlie takes us on a historical tour of the origin of angel food cake. No angels were harmed in the making of this podcast. And has a recipe of the week. In the second and third half, we are pleased to share a presentation Claire Leckie and I did for the second annual Lifting the Lid Festival. So, Charles, how are you?
I'm fine. Here recording from the recording studios in Michigan.
In the Everyone Dies recording studios located in Detroit, Michigan, otherwise known as Charlie's Sister's Pantry.
Yes. 8 modern technology swell.
It sure enough is.
You'll be great. You'll be swell. I'm sorry, what?
I always wanted to be Ethel Merman.
Ethel, I think it probably was not her, but I prefer to think it was Miss Merman I saw, obviously decades ago now, crossing the street in Manhattan.
Did you break into? You should have just broken into song and see if she turned around.
Yeah, turned around and slugged me.
She might have joined. She might have joined in.
Well, she did like to break out into song, so maybe. But no, yeah. I did not. It was, I don't know, like in the middle of 7th Avenue or something like that. And I stopped. I thought, that can't be Ethel Merman. I prefer to think it was, and I was just so stunned that I just could not move. So yeah, I'm going with that. I saw Ethel Merman decades ago.
And I believe you. I believe you. So what do you got for us today, Charles?
So, Marianne, a few episodes, you mentioned a chiffon cake recipe you had wrestled with until you found the proper pinches and dashes to recreate the flavor the girls had grown up with. So, let's take a peek at the chiffon cake from a recent newspaper article titled, "The Cake Recipe That Was a Secret for 2 Decades." It's an origin story straight out of old Hollywood.
Ooh,
cool. Da, da, da. To begin with, 100 years ago, the chiffon cake did
This is going to be a long podcast, folks. You better be comfortable.
Yeah, so anybody who needs to take a nap or take a potty break, go ahead. We'll probably still be here when you get back. I know, it's a long-ass story. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start from 1927 and work our way up, year by year.
Oh, God.
So, in 1927, actually specifically in 1927 Los Angeles, a former insurance agent named Harry Baker, that was his real name, Baker, who made the chiffon cake. Harry Baker, having abandoned a wife and children in Ohio to make a new life for himself in Hollywood, fiddled obsessively with ingredients and measurements in his kitchen until he came up with a recipe for a new cake. Baker sold his cakes to the Brown Derby, a chain of restaurants. The original was hat-shaped and became synonymous with the golden age of Hollywood. Joseph Hart in The Rake reported that Baker installed a dozen hot plate ovens in his bungalow apartment to meet demand. Finished cakes were set to cool on the porch, where customers retrieved them, leaving $2 payment in the mail slot, Hart wrote. The equivalent of around $45 today.
Good God.
Actress Barbara Stanwyck ordered the cake for parties. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt asked for the recipe. For 2 decades, Baker refused to divulge his secret until 1947, when he spilled the beans to General Mills and his gal pal, Betty Crocker. How much he was paid, he took to the grave when he died in 1974. Instead of butter, he used vegetable oil in a batter thick with yolks and folded together with peaks of whipped egg whites, curling at the tips. GM, not the car company, unveiled the recipe the following year in a pamphlet titled Betty Crocker Chiffon. The cake, called chiffon for its weightlessness, one person observed, "It's almost nothing, this cake, and yet so rich." In the United States, the novelty has worn off. Chiffon cake has a mostly retro appeal now, but in Asia, its lightness has brought it enduring fame. Not many Asian cuisines have a tradition of heavy desserts, says Christopher Tan, an author of cookbooks. In Singapore, where he lives, the temperature and humidity are enemies of more traditional cakes. It's a relief not to have to cream butter for 20 minutes, a process that can go belly up very quickly, Tan says. In doing research for his cookbooks, Tan found a news item from 1952, when Singapore was still a British colony, about a bake sale featuring chiffon cakes held by the local women's auxiliary of the American Association. By the early 1980s, the cake was so popular that the Australian company White Wings developed a box mix specifically for the Singapore market, laced with pandan, whose flavor falls somewhere among hazelnut, rose, and the freshly mowed lawn after rain. Yes, so if you can figure out how to mix those ingredients.
Well, I don't even know what freshly mown lawn tastes like. Do you?
No. I can see the smell of a freshly mowed lawn after rain.
Yeah.
And that's quite lovely. But
the taste?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Mr. Tan was knocking back some of the ingredients a little too much, if you catch my drift. So, Tan started teaching chiffon cake workshops 15 years ago. The most difficult part, he says, is beating the egg whites properly. Like Baker, he has a secret. He mixes a little potato starch, which absorbs more liquid than other starches, into the meringue to guard against deflating. When Betty Crocker introduced chiffon cake in 1948, orange chiffon was one of the lead recipes. Tan's version uses mandarin oranges. I wanted to see how much zest and juice I could pack into the cake without affecting the texture, he says. Tan believes the chiffon can stand on its own, unadorned, without even the faintest snowfall of confectioner's sugar. Recipes often advise presenting the cake crown down, but sometimes, he says, I serve it perversely upright, with the cracks showing. Yeah, I'm not going to go there. Students are petrified of cracks, he says, but that's a sign that it's light. So please go to our webpage for the chiffon cake recipe and additional resources for this program. We have a small favor to ask. Thousands of you have placed your trust in Everyone Dies as a source of trusted information about serious illness, death, dying, and bereavement. We are asking you for your support in the form of a tax-deductible contribution so that we can continue to offer you quality programming. Thank you in advance for going to our website to make your donation, as well as following us on Facebook and Instagram. Visit us at www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number one, dies.org. Marianne?
Well, thank you for that magical mystery tour, magical history
The
tour.
Magical Mystery Cake Recipe Tour. Yes.
Yeah, that was interesting. This past November, Claire Lucky, who's on Instagram as the Grieving Bitch, Claire and I were invited to present at the second annual Lifting the Lid Festival. Now, Lifting the Lid is a free international online festival that lifts the lid on everything death and dying through conversations, interactive events, workshops, book readings, art and craft sessions, live music, poetry, film, and performance. This international event breaks the taboos of talking about death and dying and explores how an acceptance of death and loss ultimately leads to a more fulfilling life. So please be sure to follow them and plan to attend this next event in 2023. Usually it's in November. And it's 3-4 days of really interesting talks. So Claire and I talked about millennial grief, widowhood, and using humor to normalize the life cycle, which of course includes death. Lifting the Lid has been kind enough to let us share a presentation with you today. So take a listen. Also, if you go on the webpage on our show notes, you can see the PowerPoint presentation, see the pictures and stuff. So have a listen. And welcome to everybody from Lifting the Lid. And this is our second year presenting with Lifting the Lid. So we're very pleased to be invited back. And I'm Marianne. I'm the co-host of Everyone Dies, which is a podcast about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. And Claire Lucky is a millennial widow living in New York City who is on Instagram as the Grieving Bitch. And so I guess, Claire, you can control the slides, right? Or can we both do it or no?
Yes, I can.
All right, could you go
down?
Could you go the next one? There we go. So there's us, Claire in her wedding dress, and me not. And so this is our session talking about millennial grief. Next slide. So I'm going to start out the session with a little bit of the background about who the millennials are, and we'll make some gross generalizations about them. And then Claire will be showing you some of her work and talking about what brought her to the point of making these memes and being the Grieving Bitch on Instagram. So for the millennials, those are people born between 1979 and 1995. So right now, they would be between the ages of 27 and 43. So, like I said, I'm going to talk about generalizations. Of course, not everybody in every generation is everything. But as a group, most millennials have experience with the internet, mobile devices, social media. And so they're really the digital natives. People like me are the digital visitors who panic about all kinds of things going wrong, where the millennial generation's like, they've had it since they were growing up. They'll just like, oh, I'll fix it. It's not a big deal. So it's a wonderful skill to have that, I will admit. As a boomer, I don't have. So in the other part of the slide, millennials are, as a group, accustomed to change, live their lives as open books, are task-oriented. They have a passion for learning new things, thrive on recognition, are free-thinking and creative, and value teamwork and social interactions. And as I was looking at putting this together, I thought, oh, that's a lot of Claire. She'll tell you anything and answer any of the odd questions that I ask her. And she's very creative and just manages stuff. And what I've learned about her in the, I don't know, must have been a year, 9 months, 10 months that I've worked with her, is that she's just always there. And I don't know, from what I see, nothing seems to get her flustered, but I'm sure there's plenty of flustering going on in the background. So next slide. So what I did is I kind of looked at millennial grieving. And I'm just going to give you a couple of slides about what's in the literature. Now, Claire, what I want you to do, though, is as we look at these, is tell me if the literature is right. So first thing was that they were saying in the literature that millennials are kind of, I'm not going to say made for grieving, but better at grieving than, let's say, my generation, the boomer generation. One of their reasons was because of higher divorce rates. It was like over 50% of millennials grew up in homes where there was a divorce. And divorces spiked in the last 50 years, which makes the home life of millennial childhoods much more sort of more upheaval. So that higher divorce rate causes the individual to go through major changes, parent loss in early life, and could somehow condition millennials to be more accustomed to feeling and process grief than generations before them. So what do you think? Do you relate to that, Claire?
Oh, I've got comments about this. My parents are divorced. They have 4 divorces between them I'm netting their divorce as 1. So my mom's been married 3 times. My dad's been married twice. Every single one has ended in divorce. I'm currently trying to get my dad and my stepmom back together. I'm calling it the modern family parent trap, where we're having
Do you have a twin?
No, I need a twin. I have a cat. The cat is coming with me, and the cat will bring this together. So we'll have our group Thanksgiving, and I would love for them to be engaged by New Year's again, because I think that just needs to be a part of my modern family story. Dead husband, parents divorced all over the place, and I'd really like for them to get married one more time so we can round out that experience.
So do you think that you're better accustomed to loss and grief because of those 4 divorces?
I'd have to, this is something I should talk to my therapist about. We've never broached the subject about how all of the divorces has cumulatively impacted me. But what I can tell you that happened in my relationship with my husband, I waited 7 years before I got married to him because I saw so much divorce. I was afraid of it. I thought, well, I haven't really actually seen this work out, so why should I go through this process? And what put me over the edge to marrying him was in 2017, he was diagnosed with stage 3 brain cancer, and we didn't think it was terminal. We thought we were going to grow old together, and that triggered me to think, well, I don't want to live my life without him. I can't live my life without him. I mean, what am I waiting for? So then we got married, and unfortunately it didn't work out for us, but it took a cataclysmic shift, something that we couldn't really either of us control, to push me over the edge to feel more comfortable with getting married. And I don't think that is necessarily a normal narrative between a man and a woman. I usually hear like the woman is pushing, and in my case, it was a little different, where I was really dragging my feet, and I ended up proposing to Matt.
Oh, that's sweet. And, I realize that as people who are listening to this, they're probably saying like, wait, what's going on? So let me give the Reader's Digest version of Claire's life. Because, I know her best of all. Claire at 32 got married. 5 months after she got married, she came home with her husband having grand mal seizures, and he didn't recognize her. And in going to the hospital and being evaluated, he was diagnosed with a stage 4 glioblastoma right at the beginning of COVID. So Claire lived through COVID and treatment with Matt, her husband, and hospice with COVID, and all the craziness that went with COVID, and all the craziness that goes with cancer treatment and a glioblastoma. And Matt died. He's been dead a year of Father's Day. So Claire is now all of
16 months. It's about a year and a half without Matt.
Yep. So that's the background, which we'll get into more, but I figured you'd be like, wait, what? So now you have the Reader's Digest version. You'll get more about in a minute. So what's the next slide there? Another reason that said that millennials are good at grieving is that they hop around jobs. The boomers, as a generation, we didn't really do that all that much. I kind of stayed in jobs about 10 years before I moved to do something different as a nurse practitioner. But it's, I guess, one of the things I was reading is that millennials don't wait around for raises and that kind of thing. They'll go to a new job to get their raise and to get moving up in the world. And that part of this is, moving and going to another job is kind of makes you used to having to kind of start over. So how do you think about that? Do you think they're full of it, Claire?
For me, I have changed jobs about every 3 years. And it is salary plus variety. So I think a key tenet I was given growing up was it's important to find out what you don't like to do as much as you do like to do. So if I was sitting in a job for a year and a half and I didn't see an upward trajectory or something fulfilling, I would look and find something new. So, and that's real different from my generation. Do you think that moving around helped you with your grieving process? Well, when my husband was dying and at his end of life, and also when I was in the early stages of grief, I really wanted something constant. And outside of the love that my husband and I shared, my career was my biggest focus in life. So I was very frightened and worried about the potential for me to lose my corporate job, which I had worked for many years to get to. And I was very established at that point. I was 10 years working in financial services. It was a great job and I knew the people. So I couldn't really deal with both my home life and what I was doing between the hours of 9 and 5 being gone, because then I was dealing with a massive identity crisis. And those two things combined, I don't know if I would have survived. So equally as important to giving my husband a dignified death and trying to cram a marriage, like what should have been a 50-year marriage into under 2 years, I also had to try to balance work a little bit. And fortunately, they were very understanding and I took months off, but I went back to work when I could for even just 2 or 3 days a week because I couldn't do brain cancer 24/7. And once Matt died, I went back to work after 3 weeks because I couldn't do grief 24/7. I needed something. So I didn't want to change jobs, and I still don't want to really change jobs at this point because it's still too new. And even if I'm not 100%, I can get up and go to the office every day, and there's people that hold space for me. So for now, I'm staying with my current job. And then when I get more sure of this new version of myself, then I'll probably go back to my old millennial ways of trying to find another job that pays better or is something that's more in tune with who I am. Mm-hmm. That's great. So let's see what the next slide says. So another reason that millennials are supposed to be better at grieving is that they're used to constantly changing technology. They're always looking for a better option, faster technology, the clearest sound, most durable phone. And, of course, not all millennials are comfortable with technology, but that change and that advancement is something that is kind of ingrained, and so I guess in many ways, change is embraced in that sense. So what do you think of that? Does that work with you? The thing that comes to my mind about technology was my first point of contact was always my husband's treatment center. So for me, my husband was treated at Memorial Sloan Kettering. So I used all their services, social services, palliative care, his oncologist. That was my first line of defense. But I also needed to build a bigger village because I couldn't just have them as my one-stop shop. So I turned to social media because it was often at 11 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the morning or 10:15. The times were always different when I needed advice or when I needed an answer. So I could go on Instagram or go on Google and see what what satiated the need. And it's through those searches that I found books on hospice, that I found ways to caregive for my husband. And even if it wasn't necessarily glioblastoma or brain cancer, there were other modalities or other illnesses, like another type of illness is dementia. That also has to do with the mind. But some of those techniques were things that I could apply to my husband.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. What's the next slide? So, it's you. As Claire was saying, what she did in terms of handling her grief and handling Matt's illness, which again, as a boomer, it would probably never occur to me to go this route. But she, I'll let you tell the story about becoming the grieving bitch.
So it has to do with the culmination of all these experiences, Matt's death, and then the final tipping point with the grieving bitch was my first holiday season without my husband. So we're about to get into that season again, but I felt so alone, grief-stricken, just didn't know what to do with myself in terms of having a community around me. And then it dawned on me that I should use social media again. It's something where I'm comfortable sharing, and it's something where I'm comfortable connecting with people. And I've always embraced humor. I've always done anything for a laugh or a joke, and I've loved memes and GIFs my entire life. So I made my first GIF in December of 2021. And I remember it, and I can share it with everybody after this. And I'm probably going to post it again around December of this year. But it had to do with, the phrase the rising phoenix after a horrific event. So my meme was a petrified owl, because that's what I felt like, not really a rising phoenix. So I made a joke based on that. And I just kept making memes that ended up being a diary about how I was dealing with grief day to day. And I would also process what I went through as a newlywed with a dying husband. And I would do once a week on Throwback Thursday, I would make a meme about what it was like to be a caregiver in a pandemic and doing it all myself. And this image is actually Mrs. Doubtfire. And this was important for me because the movie Mrs. Doubtfire is where Robin Williams and his wife gets divorced, and he wants to see his children on a regular basis, and he decides to dress up as a nanny. So he's doing something that he never thought he would do, and I was doing something that I thought I'd never do at the age of 32. And that character really resonated with me. And even though it was very tragic and very sad what I went through, there were these moments where I was like, I cannot believe I'm doing what I'm doing. So I had a daily playlist, and one of the starting songs was Dude Looks Like a Lady, which is the theme songs in Mrs. Doubtfire. So that's what inspired this meme. And a lot of my memes have a backstory that I'm trying to tell. And in the comments, I'll typically write what's running through my head. But that it's a way for me to process what I'm going through and share it with other people, because every story of grief is unique. Everybody can tell their story. And my hope is that I can make it easier for the person behind me. And as horrible as my experience is, I know there's more people that are going to go through what I went through. And if I can just make that 5 minutes of that person's day better, then I feel like there's some meaning to what I went through.
Right. So thank you for that. What's the next? So now we have a series of memes that Claire will, I guess, tell us what was going on in her head when she made these.
Oh yeah, this is a good one. This I hear a lot. What should I say to somebody who just lost a loved one? And then this is a character from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I think his name is Mac. But anyway, he says, first of all, not everything happens for a reason, so jot that down. And that's so true. That phrase, that cliche, everything happens for a reason, it doesn't. I used to believe in astrology, and before that, I was a practicing Christian, and I think loss of faith is very common in grief. And for me, there's no reason that my husband should have gotten brain cancer. He didn't do anything. So I think my life really debunked this. Everything happens for a reason. So I just want people to stop saying that to grievers.
Yes. And in fact, we did at Everyone Dies, we did a podcast with actually two grieving women talking about this very topic, about what helped, what didn't help, and everything happens for a reason is definitely on the top of the list of things that don't help. But if you're interested in hearing more about what does help, you can go to www.everyonedies.org and look for that show. It's maybe, I don't know, a couple months ago we did that. But
yeah,
you can just put in, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
So go and listen to that because it's very enlightening from both the people that we interviewed in terms of what helped and what didn't. So what's your next one?
At the store when that song comes on. Songs can be so triggering, and sometimes it's not the songs that you think about, because you know your wedding song would be triggering. You know the song that you listen to 1,000 times with your husband would be triggering. But sometimes there'll be a song that you didn't know was triggering, and then it comes on and you're like, oh my God, we were on our first date when we went and I listened to this song last time. And so that's what this represents for me, is it's not always the songs that you predict, but it's just that moment, and it just feels like a stab in the stomach or something like that.
Or a frisbee in the neck, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Also, pro tip on grief is to wear sunglasses everywhere for the first 6 months so you can cry freely.
Yes. So what's your next one?
Yes. Preparing.
Now we're into Valentine's Day.
This is widow specific potentially. So I always thought Valentine's Day was kind of a jokey holiday. My husband and I didn't celebrate it too much. We would always cook dinner at home and let that be that. We never really went out, except every once in a while we would go see a hockey game because that's thematic. That's wintry, and we both loved hockey. But I felt so much anxiety and stress as I led up to my first Valentine's Day as a widow. I didn't realize how triggering the whole thing would be. It was difficult to be around people. I didn't leave the house on Valentine's Day. I worked from home. I felt like if somebody so much as made a joke that, oh, I forgot it was Valentine's Day, I could just explode in just a rage-filled rant. So that's how I felt.
And isn't it part of the whole grieving part for you was that as a millennial, you're doing something that your peer group's not doing. Your peer group's at that point, getting married, having babies, doing whatever it is. But they're not putting diapers on their husband. They're not watching their husband die. And they're not alone on Valentine's Day because the love of your life has died. And so that makes it really hard in terms of who do you talk to these things? Who do you talk about these things with? And isn't that part of your whole Instagram response, if we'll call it that, as a way of like, here's what I'm going through?
100%. Yeah, it's just as much for me as it is for other people, because I have also connected with widows across the globe, and I hold space for them, but they hold space for me. And now we can DM each other or text each other on these hard days and send each other's like loving notes of support, because I also believe that somebody that has walked your path will do for you what 100 well-wishers cannot. So anybody at my office could say, I'm sorry for what you're going through. You must really be feeling this right now. But I realize that they don't really know. But it's different when somebody else that's walked through my shoes can say, oh yeah, this is what I did the last Valentine's Day. You're not going to believe what happened this Valentine's Day. And it's that human connection that can thankfully happen with people in an online community. So I think that's what my Instagram has done for me too, is it's allowed me to make friends with other people that have been in my shoes.
And also to be able to, in a comedic way, but still for people to kind of get the sense of being in a coma right now would be better than living through Valentine's Day. It's like, unless you've been down that road, you say, oh, how could that be better? But trust me, it can be better,
It's, at least. This is also a good point too for some of my friends that follow me on Instagram that are not grievers, or they just don't have the experience that I have, or haven't experienced death at such a young age. They see my memes sometimes, and then they'll come up to me when we're at the gym together or something, and they'll be like, I saw your post. And they'll be like, and usually it's something really nice, like, hey, Claire, if you want to get coffee, or if you want to go get ice cream, because everybody knows I love ice cream, they reach out to me, and it's beautiful to see that I am raising awareness for something that they just wouldn't think of. And it helps them take care of me.
Yeah. And hopefully they'll be able to take care of others in their life who are grieving, and make an impact on how they approach their own grieving too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's your next meme?
The aftermath of changing the cable bill to my name. Oh, it's one of the harder things is changing the utilities, whether it's the cell phone, the cable bill, the internet. It's gonna. I feel like for me, it's just gonna knock me out. I would usually try to stagger these tasks on one weekend, and like if I was canceling the cable bill or changing it to my name, I would do that on a Saturday midday and then plan nothing for the rest of my night. So I could literally do this, just cry, watch TV, and eat, and process what I need to process.
And I think, I mean, I don't want to treat non-grievers as people from a foreign land, but those who haven't been through this might think, oh, seriously, you need that much time to change a name? But it's not the changing of the name, it's acknowledging, it's taking out that death certificate and mailing it to these people and having to say, this is what happened. This person has died. It's not the changing of the name, but of what it means. And all the paperwork that goes with the death of a partner or a husband is phenomenal. And until you go through it, you have no idea what a pain it is.
I also didn't expect one piece when I was taking my husband off our cell phone plan. I couldn't give them his cell phone back. And I didn't know that was going to happen until I walked into the store. Because at AT&T, they will if you give the phone back, you get some sort of a discount. And then I looked the store owner in the eyes and I said, I can't give you this phone. I just need this phone. And I don't care what it costs. I can't give it back. And I just thought, he's touched this so many times, and I couldn't see it going to somebody else or going in a landfill. It's just that it was that split second where I was like, I'm not ready to give this up. And I think part of grieving is understanding that it's okay. You don't have to give it up, and it can be 100% on your timetable. I haven't touched the phone since, but I have it. And that's the point, is I still have it. And if I ever want to get rid of it, I can get rid of it. If I want to make something out of it, I can make something out of it. But I just need to satiate the need in my grieving process.
And what did the phone guy say when you said that?
He just said, okay.
That was wise, right?
Yeah, just the one word was okay. That was enough. It was wise. He was fitting life lessons with that.
Yes. Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Just please don't cry.
Yeah.
What's your next? And I'll admit to everybody, I went through and picked out the memes. Claire had nothing to do with the memes that I threw in here, but I picked out the ones that I thought, these are the ones that really connect with what that grieving experience is. So you can tell me if I did a good job or not. What's the next one?
Oh, I love this one. I remember the moment that this happened. I was getting coffee with a coworker that I hadn't seen since before Matt died. And he is actually from the same town of Matt. And I thought he knew that my husband died. He didn't know. And I had to do the whole like, oh yeah, by the way, my husband died during the pandemic. And I don't mean to gloss over that, but I've done it many times at this point. And he was he was taken aback because you wouldn't expect it from a 32-year-old. And one of his reactions was literally this: Are you getting help after everything you've been through? And I did this. I laughed and I said yes, because to me, the question, are you getting help? I wouldn't be in front of you if I wasn't getting help. I needed help from February 4th, 2020, when my husband was diagnosed, to now, to this very day that I sit in front of you. So I didn't ask for help a lot in the beginning because that's my predisposition. And now I've learned to just, all you have to do is say help, and people will usually come to you. And I really couldn't have gone this far without it.
Yeah, I think that people don't really realize that if you weren't getting help, you'd still be in bed, with the covers over your head, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see your next one.
This is about our story, Marianne.
Yeah, this is when I came in Claire's life. So I don't know even how I came across you, but I came across you on Instagram, and I would just laugh because A, I have a dark sense of humor, and B, things were just so spot on that you were saying. So I contacted Claire and I said, are you interested in, coming on like twice a month and being, regular correspondent to help guide millennials through what your experience is and maybe help them with theirs? And she's like, okay. Take very much arm twisting. And so you did this meme.
I did this meme because I call them my non-griefy friends, but the people that haven't lost a loved one that's in their immediate circle, I think expected me to just return to my life, return to my corporate job and watching hockey and doing all of the things that 2019 Claire did. But 2021 Claire is a very different person. I'm very colored by the experience of brain cancer, hospice, my husband dying, all that. And I'm just moving forward with it. It's going to be a part of me. And I mean, now I think I'm just that girl. Now I think my friends and family are really so used to this. They're starting to just send me articles about death and dying. My father just sent me an article about a movie that was made about another woman that went through an experience of losing her husband to pancreatic cancer. So now my friends have go non-griefy friends of mine. They've transitioned from this face to, oh yeah, that's just Claire. She does this stuff.
This is what she does. So have those non-griefy people listen to Everyone Dies? Do they listen to your interviews, or do they engage with that, or do they just say that's just what you do?
It's a mixed bag. But an experience that happened in the last month was one of my college roommates has one of her best friends from high school that just went through a tremendous tragedy. And I've known her as an acquaintance for about 10, 15 years. And her name is Ashley. And I went to her wedding. Several years ago, she had 2 kids. And one of her children is 3 years old. And last month, he died suddenly in a routine procedure, what was supposed to be a routine procedure.
Oh my God.
And yeah, my best friend called me and said, this is what happened to Ashley, and we're going to need your services. So I think now my non-griefy friends may have these experiences that happen, and I was just the first one down the chute, and now they know that I can help provide them with resources, and I'm happy to step up. I'm engaged in talking to my acquaintance Ashley, and I'm sure we'll become friends more closely than we have before, because our lives didn't pan out the way they were supposed to pan out. She's the same age as me, so she's 35 and just lost a child. So she's unfortunately in one of the clubs you don't want to be in.
Right. And you also are involved in other things besides Everyone Dies, and besides Instagram. You have a live show, and you're planning your funeral live. Do you want to talk about those two things?
Yep. So I am engaged with another group called TG and Beyond. It stands for To the Grave and Beyond. And they plan online virtual memorials. And on the back of our Everyone Dies funeral series, which I think we released in May of 2021, it got me thinking about my own funeral and my own end of life. Because now that my husband's dead, if I get a terminal illness or hit by a bus or whatever, I need to plan for this. And now I need to redo all of my documents. So I reached out to my friends at TG and Beyond and said, hey, I want to plan for my funeral. Is this crazy? Can we do this online or on Instagram Live? And they said, no, not crazy. Let's do it. So now it's spiraled into a series that we're going to host over the next coming months, where we plan my advanced care directives. We plan for what I would want in hospice. We plan for who would get my cat. We write my will and determine where my possessions go, what my funeral is going to look like, all of these things in a series of Instagram Live modules. And then we might have longer episodes that we post on YouTube. So if anybody's interested, I encourage you to follow me, and on Grieving Bitch on Instagram or TG and Beyond. They're a great resource as well. And you can watch me plan for my own end of life. And per my usual style, I will be sharing confessionals and everything that goes through my head along the way. And I'm sure there will be funny memes.
Oh, I'm counting on that. And you're part of a squad, right?
Yep. Marianne and I also decided to kick off another Instagram account called The Healing Squad, where we tackle emotional damage, one frustration at a time. We meet every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and the sessions are recorded and posted on our Instagram, so you can always catch the replay. It's the two of us plus our friend Anita Myers. And we just tackle the topic of the day, and we rotate between the three of us. The last one that we did was Fight Club. Actually, it was Mental Health Fight Club.
Yeah,
that was a lot.
Yeah, and so we encourage you to come in and listen. We don't decide too soon in advance what we're going to talk about, so they're pretty current and very open and broad range of people and age groups. So come join us for that. What's your next meme?
This is a play on what everybody else my age is doing versus me. Mm-hmm. So I have not gone to a wedding as a widow yet. I am very thankful for that. But any type of bridal event, unless it's a bachelorette party, that for some reason I feel like it could get really debaucherous, and that would be fun for me. But I want nothing to do with any of these things. So I have not gotten to the point in my grief journey where I could go to a bridal shower yet.
What about baby showers? Do you have feelings about that too?
I went to one. My cousin's having a baby in the next month, and I'm very happy for her. So I did that, and I was fine with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. I'll let you go to the next one if you...
Yeah. This was about the first time I went on vacation after my husband died. When my husband died, I knew my cat wasn't going to die, but I think something subconsciously in me felt like I needed to keep him very close to me. So when I went to visit my dad right after my husband died, for example, I took my cat with me. When I went to visit my aunt right after, I took my cat with me. It just became so innate that he was always with me as emotional support, and I needed somebody to be there with me in my house because I had just lost the love of my life. So when it came time for me to leave my cat for the first time, I had this crisis that I didn't really expect, where I felt so guilty about leaving my animal. And I knew he was okay. He's a cat. I had a cat sitter. Everything was going to be fine. But I just felt like I was still a monster. And I felt like I was just doing him wrong.
I remember when this happened. Now, and also, didn't you have a cat that died right when Matt was diagnosed?
Yes. My husband's last Christmas in 2020, I knew that I didn't know, but I was very aware that it could be our last Christmas together. And I wanted to make it perfect. I wanted all the food that he loved. I went as far to get like 20 pounds of prosciutto, which is insane, but it was his favorite spiced meat. And I just wanted there to be enough for all of his family. And I put in all these efforts to get all that done. And then on December 22nd, our cat just wasn't coming out from under the sofa. I knew something was wrong. And I took him to the vet, and they said, yeah, he's got a tumor in his stomach. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, my cat and my husband has cancer. So then it became this question of, do we treat the cat for cancer? And our cat named Bailey was about 10 to 12 years old at this point. And I couldn't handle putting my cat through this. He wasn't a cat that could do with the vet, and he wasn't going to be himself. So we also had to go see my husband's oncologist on December 23rd. So I remember a very chaotic waiting room experience where my husband and I were on the phone, and it was on speaker because logistically, that was the only way we could do it. We were talking to the cat shelter and making these end of life decisions about our cat, and having to deal with my husband's MRI and the scan results all in one day. And the funny point on this is we were causing such a disturbance in Memorial Sloan Kettering's waiting room that we got into chemotherapy faster than we had ever gotten in before. They're like, get these people out of there. They're talking about their dying cat right before Christmas. And we ended up having to put our cat down on December 23rd. So my husband's last Christmas was my dream of that being a perfect Christmas was completely shot to shit. But nevertheless, we had to make a difficult choice. And I think we ultimately made the right choice. And in true Claire fashion, I adopted a new cat before New Year's. So Mikey is here and with me today, and he's a little slice of heaven.
And I think, there you go for our listeners. There's another life hack. If you need to get into chemo fast, pretend you're putting your cat down, right?
Yep.
Really loudly in the waiting room.
Cause a scene.
Yes. What's your next meme?
Using the widow card to get out of a minor inconvenience. I am planning to use the widow card to get out of jury duty.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Is that a good reason? I mean, it's a good reason.
I don't think I can be. I don't think I can be I can't be impartial. I might be a little heavy-handed with indictments.
Oh, you want to mete out the punishment for people? Is that the story?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good to know. I mean, don't be at any of my trials.
I'll do my best. But I've gotten comfortable enough with using the widow card to get out of like little things like social engagements or just little, truly like this says, like a minor inconvenience is when I'll throw the widow card. I won't throw the widow card for big things. It's really just the little ones. Mm-hmm. I got to take one for the team or win one back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's things you can control, right?
Yeah.
You have the slides in front of you, so I'll let you just move them through as makes sense, because I don't remember what the next one is.
The further I get into my grief journey, the more confused I get. It's true. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a good place, and then all of a sudden I wake up and I realize, oh, I've been in an ebb for the last few days rather than the flow that I thought I was in. So I'm in my second year right now, and that happens a lot. I feel like I've got things under control, and then I can have an emotional outburst at the drop of a hat. So that's what this speaks to.
And we did a show for Everyone Dies on the second year of grieving, because one of the things that we've talked about, Claire and I, is that there's a lot written about like what goes on in the first year, but nobody really tells you about, oh, there's the second year, and in many ways it's worse than the first.
I think the second year people expect you to be better, and they also forget, because people can be very self-absorbed and just forget about what the other person has just gone through. So that's what I'm experiencing, is that sympathies run out, but my grief is still pretty much all over the shop.
Right. And sometimes people can not be really very nice about it, right? They're like, well, wait, that didn't just happen, did it? That was like last year. Or what's the problem now? Do you hear that?
People haven't directly said this to me, but I make it a point when somebody says, I lost so-and-so, if it's in the last 3 years, I say, oh, so that's recent. And I do that to acknowledge how there's no timetable on grief.
Right. Right. That's good. What do you have next, sir? I don't know how many you have left.
This is true. So I try multiple coping skills, and exercise is one of them. And sometimes I feel as if I build up a resistance to one, and I have to try another.
And so you've gone through walking, and you go to a dance studio. Now, is that like every day?
Every day.
Every day. You want to tell the listeners about that?
Yeah. So I go to 305 Fitness, and 305 is based on the Miami, Florida area code. They have online classes, so you can do it from wherever. You can do it from London. You can do it from Ireland. You can do it from Hawaii, anywhere. So I call it an immersive pop dancing experience. And I go to a live studio in New York City, but there's a live DJ, a light show, and you shake your tail feather, you twerk it out. And I've really found a lot of community in it. So I chat with the instructors, I chat with the frequent members of 305 Fitness, and it's even the owner at this point tells me that I should get a life because I'm there so often. But it's still helpful. It's nice. It's a very loving place, and I need a vice. So if dancing is my vice, it could be worse.
That's right. It could be way worse. It could be way worse. And so what other things have you tried in terms of working through these? You've tried yoga?
Yeah, I've tried restorative yoga. That helps to a degree that I can do it. I try massages. That's been very helpful, like spa days, stuff like that. I'm very fixated on meal prepping and making sure I drink enough water and staying hydrated. And I also like journaling and coloring books, anything with my hands, to be honest with you.
Okay. In fact, I think I remember seeing a meme this morning when I was going through all your memes, was one about the amount of money you spent on self-care.
There's no
manicures, pedicures, massages. Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah. That's great. So this was something that I saw. 1 minute you're getting a text. This is the sort of the millennial grieving experience, and you can tell me if you relate to this. 1 minute you're getting a text that says, "So sorry for your loss," and the next, "Want to go to a movie?" It's bad enough that we think grief ends in 3 or 4 days, but with social media, it's reduced to 15 minutes.
I felt this very much in the beginning, that I was pressured to go out to social events a lot, more so then than I am now. And I think that speaks to how people see me as being social, and that means you're okay. When one of the last things I want to do when I'm not okay and comfortable with myself is go out and be around people. So like my worst nightmares in the beginning were being at a party for 2 or 3 hours because I had to put on the facade that I'm normal when all I'm doing inside is trying to hold it together.
And how have you, because we've had a lot of discussions about this when we've done our interviews for Everyone Dies, but for the listeners, what kinds of things do you struggle with in terms of this social? Because I've heard you talk about like feeling lonely, but yet what do you have the bandwidth to do about it? Does that sound like I have that right?
I think being at a dinner party where I'm the only one, where I'm like the only single one, that's a difficult pill for me to swallow. I remember that happened and they spent 20 minutes talking about engagement rings, and I just disassociated for that entire 20 minutes because it was very difficult for me to listen to, because I was wearing my wedding ring from my husband, and all it did was just make me think about how he wasn't here. And I didn't want to interrupt the conversation and stop the flow and say, guys, can we just move on? Because that would bring more attention to me. Mm-hmm. So that is something I struggle with. I think a way that I curtailed and coped in this in my first year of grief was I reduced the amount of time I would be at a place or always have an excuse ready. So getting coffee with someone, that could be a 30-minute experience. That could be a 60-minute experience. And that doesn't hit into that's something that I felt like I could handle. But going to a holiday party, for example, I felt like I needed an excuse to leave after an hour. And I can sit here today and say, you don't need an excuse. All you have to do is say, I want to go, I have to leave. But I had an excuse of, I need to go, I have to go take care of my cat, or I have to go work out, or I have to go do something. And that was to satiate that people felt like I was okay to leave it. Like I wanted to make them feel like I was okay by giving them an excuse for me leaving.
Right. And you don't really owe explanations to people either. And I think that that's also part of your experience of being the only widow at something is very different than in older age when you become widowed, because women tend to live longer than men. And, how many times if you start paying attention, do you see, 4 women and 1 guy out at lunch or out at breakfast or whatever. And it's very common because, there's the one guy who's still driving, and there's the group of women who only have their girlfriends and whoever to go out with because their husbands have died. And so it's for somebody who's in my age group, it's a more normal experience that there's a whole group of women who have husbands who have died, as opposed to at your age where not only are the husbands living, but they're also talking about future plans and engagement rings and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what do you have for your next there? Oh, so these are things that I found in terms of actions to assist a millennial adult through grieving. And I don't know, Claire, if you want to look at them and say, that's crap, or yeah, that would help. Like sending a personal email or private message rather than a social post?
Oh yeah, easily. I mean, I see rather than a social post or physical card. Yeah, I don't necessarily want my friend tagging me in a post on social media saying, Claire, so sorry for your death anniversary of your husband today. No, send me a text message. Don't I know I'm the grieving bitch on Instagram, but I feel like that's more for you and your notoriety than it is for me. And the personal card, I'll allow it as so long as it's not religious. I think that we should start to get to a place where I feel this as an agnostic and my husband was an atheist. I got cards that were basically geared towards Catholicism. And it just felt like it was more because of their religious beliefs than what my husband and I were dealing with. So that's what I have about that. So I do believe in tailoring it personally to the griever, and whether you could know as little. I mean, everybody likes to eat. You could send a gift card or comment on food or something like that, or their favorite sports team. Anything that's tailored to them.
Things like remembering when the anniversary of the death is, so that you can. You think that's important?
I think that's really nice. I really like when people remember my wedding anniversary with my husband and his death anniversary.
Okay. Can you look at these other ones and do you have any comments about them as we're wrapping up?
Yeah. Yeah, listening to your loved ones when they need someone to talk to. Send a kind email or message about a memory you shared with the descendant. I love number 3. I love it when people ask me about qualities about my husband, or when they give me a memory rather than asking about his illness and his death process.
I think, like for me, as a boomer, I look at these, send a message, don't send a card, send an email. And it's like, my kids are in their 20s, mid-20s, and they'll be like, Mom, only losers talk on the phone. And that's what I'm seeing here. It's like, does anybody call anybody anymore? But I guess that's for losers, right?
Yeah, I think you send it. You have to text me before you call me. Yeah.
And I think the last is be kind to yourself. Join a digital support group, because I was reading somewhere where it was old people go and sit in the folding chairs. Millennials don't do that. And treasure the decedent's belongings that are in your possession. And Claire, you've talked about that, and you've even told me that you still have Matt's walker, right?
I do. I'm planning on making some sort of a metal work out of it. That was one of those things that I couldn't get rid of. I got rid of all the medical equipment except for that. And it was his first medical equipment that he had was his walker, and he went to a wheelchair and other things. But it was also his pride to use that on his last day rather than the wheelchair. So I felt like that was the first one and that was the last one. And I'm going to make that like some sort of a hockey stick or a memorial or something. So that's personal to me.
All right. And the last slide. So these are just resources in terms of how to find us. And then on the right side are some millennial-friendly kind of things. There's a website called Modern Loss, which I thought looked really interesting. And also, have you heard of this website, The Dinner Party?
No, but I'm curious.
There's a description of it where they have this community where it's about millennial grieving, and you can make a friend or have a virtual dinner party with people. So there's some resources there for you. Are any of the listeners have any questions for us?
There's been some comments throughout, but no specific questions as far as I can see. Lots of affirmations and That's just amazing, and what a great collaboration between you two. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for letting us come on. Claire, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with anybody?
Thank you guys so much for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing you on Instagram. Don't be a stranger, reach out.
Be sure to follow us on the Healing Squad on Wednesday nights, and Everyone Dies has a long, these things never stay in pictures. And check out Everyone Dies, because we have 2.5 years of podcasts on so many different topics. This week's topic is about maintaining sexual health and maintaining a sexual and intimate relationship with someone with serious illness. And Claire and I had a great interview on that one. And so if you need any tips on buying vibrators or anything, listen to that show.
Got your back on that.
Yep, we got all the info.
Fantastic. Thank you all for being here, and thank you both so much for such an interesting presentation. And I've put Everyone Dies and Grieving Bitch into the chat so people have access to those as well.
Great.
Thanks so much, Susan.
Thank you.
Good to meet you both.
Great to meet you, Susan. Thank you for hosting us.
My pleasure. We'll stay in touch through Instagram.
Excellent.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
And that's it for this week's podcast. Stay tuned for the ongoing adventures of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening. Sand flows through an hourglass, whether it's right side up or upside down. This is Charlie Navarrete. And from author and radio host Garrison Keillor, the living wander away. We don't hear from them for months, years, but the dead move in with us to stay.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift. Thank you for listening.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.